Hi, welcome to Cauldron Her Daddy, podcast about astrology, witchery, sex, and whatever else Meredith and I want to talk about. I'm Sarai Johnson. I'm a somatic sexologist and witch.
And I'm Meredith Holley. I am an astrologer, human design reader, and also a witch. Funny we wound up here today together.
Amazing. Ugh. The stars must have aligned just perfectly to make this auspicious occasion happen.
Must be.
Yay! Today we're going to talk about the month ahead astrology for May 2026. And so
Yay.
Meredith, our resident astrologer, is going to take the lead on that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the transits that are coming up this month that might be useful for you to know about as you're tracking life, living life.
Sarai and I always pull cards before we record episodes, and we pull a card for our listeners. And today, listeners sound a little overwhelmed and this is a lot to absorb. So we're going to try to talk about it in pretty practical terms, make it hopefully a little less overwhelming, but you're not supposed to know all of it ahead of time. And also send questions to us if you have questions about any of this, I think. I've been looking at this stuff for 25 years, and it takes a long time to absorb. But I think the principle that I want to bring to this specific episode that's true in all of the episodes is tracking astrology is tracking cycles. Just like the weather has cycles, the planets have cycles, the energy around us is a cycle. And so the cycles come back around sometimes in a long time, sometimes in a short time. So we're going to start with the lunations because I think the moon transiting around and transiting through the parts of the sky around the earth is a pretty simple cycle to track, like a way to start tracking cycles. Another way to start tracking cycles, this requires you to have an astrology software, though, is that every day the sky changes. And so you can track the sun as a cycle, the appearance of the moon as a cycle over the sky. But what we're talking about is the movement of the moon through parts of the solar system sky.
It's going through the like we're tracking it through the sky, but also bringing it back into the astrology side of it. The moon touches all of the signs in the zodiac over the lunation period of the 28 days.
Yeah, that's true. And it's true, except that in Western astrology, we no longer literally track with the constellations as signs. And so that's kind of parts of the sky. So we label part of the sky as Aries. We label part of the sky as Taurus. But if you look to the constellations of Aries and Taurus, it no longer tracks with that. And that's a super technical thing called precession, but it's about the tilt of the earth. And if you track with Indian astrology, though, sidereal astrology, that does track with the literal constellations. So that's me nerding out on that. That's not necessarily, but I like to be accurate.
Yeah.
Anyway, so go ahead and get overwhelmed ahead of time.
Point being, those 28-day moon cycles are very helpful. And the way that I like to think about it is one of the things that I think is important for us to do in a world where technology is moving at lightning speed all the time is to remember the pace of human time. And I think the moon cycle is the pace of human time. That's how things work. Like, we're a part of nature. Nature moves along in cycles very closely with the moon, I think. And so we all have that and we get that. I think to me, I feel like that's part of our human birthright, is to have a community, like a communion with the moon in particular.
I totally agree. And for me, tracking where the moon is in the parts of the sky has been a really profound experience of relating to my body also. I think our bodies are connected to the sun and the moon in a really profound way. Like, we spend a lot of winter being like, why am I sad? And then the sun comes out and we're like, oh, I'm no longer sad. Now I get it. And the moon has something more subtle, but also really similar. Like, I can really track my own sleep cycles, how much I need sleep throughout the moon. So I think even though this can be an esoteric conversation, it's meant to be a practical conversation about cycles and how we are in touch with our actual bodies. And I think like even just me watching you and me separately, I think we have different times of the month when we are really tired. And it's interesting to say we have different natal charts, we have different human design charts and astrological natal charts. And so it interacts with us differently. The moon does, the sun does, all of it does. So it's individual also. So we start with the lunations. We start May 1st. There's a full moon in Scorpio. So that means the sun is in Taurus and the moon is in Scorpio. And so they're opposite each other. They're at a polarity. And to me, that polarity is really material. It's very also about the body. The sun in Taurus is very practical, very luxurious, cozy. The moon in Scorpio is very intense. It's in what's called its fall. So it's not comfortable in Scorpio, but it draws resourcing to itself. And so this is a pointed time of intense, almost materialism, but also depth in what does materialism mean? What do our needs mean? At like just after there's the full moon, Venus sextiles Saturn. And then just a little bit later in the day, Mercury goes conjunct with Chiron. Venus sextile Saturn is also an experience of material. What is the practical meaning of what are your practical needs? What are you practically setting up as structure around your relationships specifically? But Saturn's in Aries, Venus is in Gemini. Venus in Gemini is light. And so one thing to ask is what kind of freedoms do you need and what boundaries can you put in place to protect your own freedoms? This is a supportive day for that. And some of that is around material need, having material need because of that full moon. And then Mercury conjunct Chiron in Aries is another cycle. So we've been having different planets go over that Chiron in Aries. So over our wounding around authenticity. And Mercury comes through and says, how do you authentically express yourself? What are your woundings around how you communicate who you authentically are? And so it has relationship energy. It has material energy. It also has intensity. So I'm probably going to take a nap that day. Like that May 1st is a lot. Mm-hmm. May 16th then is the new moon. So if you're tracking moon cycles, the moon is opposite the sun every 2 weeks and then is in the same place as the sun every 2 weeks. And the new moon happens when the sun and the moon are in the same place. So in the middle of the month, May 16th, the new moon is in Taurus. That happens the same day, speaking of cycles, when Mars goes conjunct Chiron. This is how do you show up with action authentically? And what are your woundings around that? What's scary about that? A lot of times, just listening to a lecture about how abnormal it is for us to be expected to provide vulnerable information to an audience of people, right? And that's what we do on social media. Like, even if you have a private account, most people's private account has 100 followers maybe, right? Like 100 of your closest friends. So you're putting private information on a bulletin board that 100 people are going to see, right? Mm-hmm. What are the actions that we're pressuring ourselves to take to show up authentically? What are the actions that we experience cultural pressure to take in terms of exposing ourselves and being authentic? How do we handle wounding around being who we truly are? And Chiron's going to eventually go out of Aries. Chiron's in the last degrees of Aries. This ends up being the end of these planets for a while, going right over that authenticity wounding. And I think that there's also the opportunity to show up vulnerably with this new moon. So the new moon in Taurus carries that sun Taurus energy, that practicality, and then the moon is there too. So even though it probably will feel like a vulnerable day, how do you be vulnerable just with yourself? How do you show up for yourself vulnerably and acknowledge your own wounding? And then at the end of the month, May 31st, we have another full moon. So 2 weeks later, there's a full moon in Sagittarius. So the moon is in Sagittarius at that point. The sun is in Gemini. So the sun is another cycle that we naturally track, right? Like we know when it's spring, we know when it's winter. We track the sun, and the sun moves into a new sign every month. And that's just a regular movement of the sun into a new sign. So that's another. So as we see the full moon in Sagittarius with the sun in Gemini, this is a completely different energy than the sun in Taurus and the moon in Scorpio. And so also that tracks, the moon has now gone completely around the entire zodiac and is now one sign beyond where it started in the month. So you hit all of the signs. The moon hits all of the signs during the month, and it ends up in Sagittarius. Moon in Sagittarius, I always, when people have that natally, that is like a truth teller. That's a person who sees the thing people are trying to cover up and says, hey, let's talk about this. Like we need, and the sun in Gemini is the ability to see all perspectives, like the ability to be all perspectives, the lightness of trying on different identities and treating life as a game, right? So Sagittarius points to the one truth. Gemini says, I see all the truths. Like, why do we need to pick one? I like them all, right? And so
sounds like a good day for some ethical shit talk, quite honestly. Yes. It's like, that's the energy that I'm feeling about that particular full moon.
If I can stay awake on a full moon, we might be able to manage that. Sleepy on a full moon.
I would never ask you to show up for something on a full moon. That would be cruel.
Thank you. But maybe in the lead up, we can do day before, day after, something like that. The sun in Gemini is a good time for some ethical shit talk, for sure.
Yeah.
And then that day, that same day, a little later in the day, Mercury is also in Gemini. So Mercury is how we communicate. And Mercury is sextile Chiron in Aries. So it comes back to Chiron again. Like wounding around authenticity. Who are you truly? How do you express who you truly are? I think is a theme for this month if you look at the cycles, because we start out with Mercury conjunct Chiron. We end with Mercury sextile Chiron. A sextile is a supportive aspect. You learned what you communicated at the beginning of the month about who you truly are, then is supported at the end of the month, maybe in communicating a little more clearly, a little less stressfully, with a little more lightness. So those are the lunations. I love a lunation.
Good stuff.
Okay. So now we're going to go through the month in general. So May 1st, full moon, and the other aspects we talked about. May 2nd, after Mercury goes into or conjuncts Chiron on May 1st, on May 2nd, Mercury goes into Taurus. Mercury in Taurus is great for practical communication, great for slowing down what maybe was, if you're looking at a natal chart, Mercury in Aries blurts out something without thinking about it. Mercury in Taurus slows down, thinks it through, is deliberate in communication, and stubborn. Like unwilling to change their mind. And so when this happens in the transits, a lot of times what we see is with Mercury in Aries, you see a lot of news that's, what'd that guy say? What did they say? What are they talking? Okay. And it's not that it's like primarily that it's not true. It's like just weird. Like, why did that person blurt that out? And then when you see Mercury go into Taurus, our communication becomes much more practical, much more material, more talk about resourcing and even money, thinking about money. On May 4th, Mars in Aries squares Jupiter in Cancer. And this is an interesting aspect because in traditional astrology, this is called an overcoming square. And so Mars is at the top of the square. You think about the top of the chart, and Jupiter in Cancer is at the side, and Mars is looking down at Cancer a little bit, saying, you might think you've got it going on, but I'm going to mess it up.
Thanks, Mars.
This square overall, though, is generally a positive one. The way that it happens in a way that doesn't feel great is that it's overwhelm. It's like you got 20 things that you actually want to do, and they all seem like great things, but there's just too many of them. And so if that ends up happening, you want to just like literally write everything down and this is again on May 4th. Literally write everything down, cross everything off that's not necessary, and let yourself choose, or that's not the most fun. Choose the most fun thing. And then just cross everything else off. The way that we engage with this transit in a way that like uses it against us is we're like, there's too many good things, and I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch TikTok.
So don't let the overwhelm stop you from doing the most fun thing on the list.
Yes.
I love that. I like to pick the most fun thing. That's a wonderful piece of advice.
You're really good at it too. If anyone has questions about picking the most fun thing, Sarai is a really great advice giver about that.
Thank you.
So, compliments. On May 5th, Mercury in Taurus is square Pluto in Aquarius. And so this square, this is another square, but this one is more like a tension between depth and communication. The depth of Pluto, the power of Pluto, how do we talk about fascism is a very Plutonian, especially in Aquarius, topic. And then Mercury is how we talk, right? So what are the practical ways that we talk about social justice? I think is a real quality of this. And also, you have to be willing to talk about it wrong in order to learn how to talk about it right. So this has a dynamic of, I think cancel culture is a very Mercury square Pluto, especially in these two signs kind of aspect. And then to me, cancel culture was developed around these really severe sexual assault, human trafficking, rape situations. Cancel culture started with R. Kelly and him getting acquitted of crimes where there was severe evidence of abuse. And so people started carrying signs that said cancel R. Kelly because the legal system wasn't stepping in. Then cancel culture has evolved to where there's a lot of debate around, are we just now nitpicking and monitoring things that don't matter and losing sight of the things that do matter, the substantive places where we do need to call out abuse, stop abuse. And then so in this way, I think that this aspect asks us to make mistakes. Like, you might over-censor yourself. You might over-censor somebody else. You might not censor enough. We have to be able to practically communicate and practically think about social justice issues and the transformative process the world is undergoing around human rights. And we have to mess up in that process.
Yeah. That's a scary thing to do, I think, in the best of times, and something that honestly, like, I have barely gone on social media since 2017, 2018, when that kind of call out culture, at least, was really prevalent in kind of the Instagram realm. It's It is interesting to think about, like, also what platforms are you using to do this kind of communication? Because sometimes thinking about Aquarius as like the sign of the collective and Gemini as this kind of quick moving, light, like sign, I think is really also interesting. Just the dynamics between those two things.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mercury will be in Taurus still at that
Oh,
point,
my
though.
bad.
So it will be that like more practical, but example, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we let ourselves say the thing and
Mhm.
then, um, I don't know, absorb the whole thing? I think that for me, just coming from the legal system, there's so much censorship around what lawyers can say and can't say. And there literally is on social media. Like, I've had clients sued for things that they've said
Mhm.
about severe abuse
Mhm.
on social media. And I think, like, at the end of the day, if we are going to make the profound changes that we need to make in order to have a more balanced society, a more equitable way that we regard humans, a way of not regarding humans as property, I
Mhm.
think we have to be willing to, like, I think about it in part like with social media, we receive a lot of social currency from social media. And are we only willing to receive, or are we willing to spend some social
Mhm.
currency by trying things out and maybe finding out that we don't get money back
Yeah.
in the form of social currency through
Mhm.
that? Are we willing to make mistakes? And I think that there is a lot of value in that
Mhm.
of, and also it's sensitive, and like for you, you have Mercury in Cancer, and so you have a divine right to be cared for and nurtured in communication.
Thank you. Tell everyone else. Jeez.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So that's May 5th is the Mercury in Taurus, the time to really think about how you practically communicate about these issues and maybe take a risk and mess up and see the material results of it. On May 6th, Pluto goes retrograde. I put this in, I don't think that there's a lot of meaning to the outer planet retrogrades. They happen a lot. They don't have the same kind of impact as the inner planet retrogrades. But Pluto going retrograde, the main thing to look at is if you are having an aspect to Pluto, like I am, maybe going back over the aspect. So I'm having a ascendant square Pluto. So this is going to be going back over that square for me. So
Mhm.
that's something to watch for. If you've had a transformative process that you've been working through, this is a chance to rework that transformative process
Mhm.
through those aspects. On May 10th, the sun in Taurus is sextile Jupiter in Cancer. And this is just another like great Jupiter day. I think that this doesn't have that overwhelm of May 4th when Mars is square Jupiter. This is just go express yourself, be you, ask for what you need, which is a very Taurus thing. And Jupiter's there in Cancer to provide you with a little nest of what you need. May 10th, I just think is a really nice day. It's some of the other aspects that we've seen are still active in this, but I just think watch for May 10th, use it as an opportunity to ask for what you need, and the universe is ready to give support in that. On May 12th, Mercury is sextile Jupiter. So this is another space where you can see. So the sun went into Taurus in late April, or like in the 20s in April. And then Mercury follows it. And so you can see the cycle here. How you show up on May 10th, how you communicate on May 12th is supported by Jupiter. It can also be a look at me kind of energy, and I have something to say, chat energy. But again, like with Mercury in Taurus and the sun in Taurus, that doesn't have the same kind of chat energy as those in an air sign, but it is like another really beautiful kind of nice aspect. And then as Mercury's following the sun on May 14th, Mercury goes conjunct the sun, which in traditional astrology is called a Cazimi. That is thought of to be a day where you just get a spark of brilliance. I don't personally have that experience with the Cazimis, but I like to note it. You might have a Mercury ruled chart and have a little flash of brilliance on May 14th.
Yay, that would be fun.
Yeah. And then on May 16th, that's the new moon that we already talked about. So new moon in Taurus. So we've got a lot of Taurus energy this month. And then Mars goes conjunct Chiron in Aries. That's that Chiron cycle. On May 17th, Mercury goes into Gemini. So that's when we get the energy that Sarai's been waiting for of that Mercury Gemini energy.
I was so excited. I was trying to get to it days early.
I
Days
know.
and days early.
And you're right, too, because Mercury rules Gemini. So anytime Mercury is around, you got maybe a little Gemini there. I think you were morally correct.
Thank you.
You're
I'll
welcome.
take that authority. I accept it.
Yeah. So May 17th, Mercury goes into Gemini. Venus is already in Gemini, but just about to leave. So you've got some just nice Gemini energy there. Mercury in Gemini, we went from that slow, stubborn thinking, literal thinking communication to speeding it up. Let's get it moving. And also it's interesting because you go from the Mercury Cazimi on the 14th, which is like a little flash of brilliance, but in Taurus, that practical thinking. And then Mercury goes into Gemini and it's let's speed it up. We know what's going on. We have all the conversations. And one thing I didn't say is that when you have these Mercury transits to Chiron, everybody should probably have a therapist anyway. If you don't have a therapist, you should have a therapist. These are good days to either journal for your therapy, like what you might want to share and woundings you have around authenticity, or literally go see your therapist on these days, a day where it comes up. Anyway, so back to May 17th, Mercury goes into Gemini. So our thinking, our communication speeds up. Venus is in Gemini, sextile Chiron in Aries. So that's creates that supportive sextile between our wounding around authenticity and how we show up in relationship and how we think of relationship. Mercury then that same day on May 17th goes conjunct Uranus in Gemini. So Uranus is sitting right on the Taurus Gemini cusp, just at 0 degrees of Gemini. And so any planet that's going into Gemini now hits a little spark of electricity. Uranus is the god of the sky, the thunder god. And you get quick change, flashes of brilliance, and Mercury conjunct Uranus can like almost overload that. Sometimes it can be like your electronics fry out a little bit. You're like fast thinking and then you're like, I forgot where I am.
That's like a daily occurrence for me, but yes. I usually just blame ADHD, but in this case, I will put the blame on Uranus and Mercury together.
I don't think Uranus causes ADHD, but I think Uranus, Mercury can have a little bit of a ADHD experience. The time Mercury was conjunct Uranus, I was actually going on a really long road trip, and my experience of it more was like I was supposed to log into a meeting, and then I was like, why am I logging into this meeting? This isn't going to work anyway because I didn't have enough Wi-Fi to log into the meeting. And then I was like, I can either struggle with this or just acknowledge that it's not going to happen and just scroll through podcasts like real quick. But it can have that speedy energy too. It can be like, go with those. On May 18th, Mars goes into Taurus. So that's a big shift of energy also. Like we're having these planets go into Gemini. We're having these planets go into Taurus. We're having them pass over Chiron, pass over our wounding around authenticity as they go into Taurus. So Mars in Taurus is very deliberate action, very practical ways that we show up physically. Taurus, like we talked about already, is stubborn. And so Mars in Taurus can create that energy of the like almost a sunk cost energy. I've already invested so much in this. I've already taken these actions, so I must continue until everything's done kind of action. Then later that day, Venus goes into Cancer. Venus in Cancer is just a very sweet placement. So this kind of slows things down. I think in terms of national and international crises that we're facing right now, I'm not mad that our thinking is going to be faster, but our actions are going to be a little slower.
That's good. Yeah.
I think it's not bad. It's actually the end of May and early June this year have some really nice placements that I think are the nicest that I've seen in the year overall. So take advantage of the end of May and early June. Resource yourself. Ask what you need. Venus in Cancer is very relational, but also very loyal. This is very loyal. So having this Taurus Cancer energy has a lot of stability, a lot of loyalty, a lot of understanding of our body needs, but also our relational needs and our connections to each other. I think Cancer is often described as patriotic, which I think is interesting. How do you feel about that as a Cancer?
I think it's so weird, but I get it in that I feel like Cancer, the patriotism thing speaks to feeling a part of a family. Like I feel like Cancer is very like your people kind of thing. And so I get how that kind of goes at the national level, how that would be come out that way. But that's how I generally think about it.
Yeah. And I've also been thinking, I have Cancer in the third house. And so I've also been thinking about it as covens, who are the people who are closest to us, who are not maybe blood relations, but who are truly our community. Like, I think that Cancer is a very sensitive sign. And part of sensitivity is we need more sensitivity in the world. We need more sensitivity in our communities. We need to become more sensitive so that we meet each other's needs and meet our own needs more quickly, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It seems this to me, I think the word that keeps coming through my mind is nourishing. Like the idea of like, yes, identifying the needs and attending to those needs and doing that for yourself. And then as you're able to, you can also connect that with other people as they're going through that as well.
Yeah, and the thing that came up for me with that when I was looking at all these transits is these planets are going over Chiron right before they go into Taurus and have these nice sextiles with Jupiter and Cancer. And so the moment of experiencing your wounding and your wounding around who you are also can be translated into what do you need? What are like the Taurian materially, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for other people, asking other people to meet your needs? And then even if they say no, committing to meeting your needs yourself.
Yeah.
After Venus goes into Cancer on May 18th, the moon follows. And I haven't been going through every moon transit because the moon goes into a new sign every 2 days. But the moon going into Cancer right after Venus also has sensitivity to it. So May 18th has this practical, nurturing sensitivity. It's also a very busy transit day. So Mars goes into Taurus, Venus goes into Cancer, the moon goes into Cancer. Mercury is already in Mercury in Gemini, sextiles Neptune in Aries. And then Venus in Cancer sextiles Mars in Taurus. So there are 5 major aspects on May 18th. Mercury in Gemini sextiles Neptune in Aries. And so that is like imagining potential. It's also communicating the visions that you see that are beyond the material realm. So this has a very material component. It also has a pure imagination component. Neptune in Aries, Neptune's not super comfortable in Aries, but it's envisioning ideals of how we can authentically show up, I think is one way to interpret it. So if you had an ideal around how you could be authentic, and then you were meeting your own needs around that, this day might overload you with all of that, but it gives access points to all of that. And then Venus in Cancer, sextile Mars in Taurus, is also how do we relate to others? How I think there's this real energy on this day to me of what do we owe each other and what do we owe ourselves as community? Like we are all interconnected. Me being nourished and makes me able to show up for other people. You being nourished makes you be able to show up for me and other people. I think nice transition.
I love it. I think we should call that Chidi on Agonia Day. What we owe to each other, the Good Place reference, y'all.
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Perfect.
It's a Chidi on Agonia Day. But you don't have to freak out.
No freaking out is required. But yeah. if Chidi wasn't neurotic about ethics.
Yeah. You don't have to have a tummy ache on this day. If you have a tummy ache on this day, it's totally allowed.
Yeah. That's great. And then how do you nourish your stomach ache? You figure it out.
Exactly. May 19th, Mercury in Gemini is trine Pluto in Aquarius. So this is another aspect of deep thinking. And so on May 5th, Mercury was square Pluto. That's more of a tense aspect. That's what we were talking about try out what to say and let it be wrong. Mercury in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius is you have figured it out and you know exactly what you want to say. And you maybe are saying all of the things, but it's all fun and light and how we don't have to take this as seriously as we do. We don't have to, if somebody disagrees with you on the internet, how do you make that funny? If somebody is saying nonsense about human rights, there's a lot. My social media is full of nonsense things that bro podcasters are saying about women being subservient and like how it's better for women to be subservient, and then also of hilarious responses to them that makes it worth me seeing it because the responses are so hilarious. May 19th, Mercury in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius. Not like Pluto's never obviously a hilarious aspect, and yet I feel like Mercury in Gemini can always come up with a good joke. So excellent. I think, how do we make progress around how we talk about human rights issues? But it doesn't all have to be as serious as we've made it.
Good.
May 20th, the sun goes into Gemini. So we've had this very practical, stubborn, slow-moving, material sun in Taurus, planting our gardens time of the year. And then the sun goes into Gemini, and that becomes more light. It becomes more able to see multiple perspectives. That's always the Gemini energy. So the overall vibe is lighter, wittier. We don't have to commit to one thing at all times. We can be changeable. May 21st, Venus in Cancer squares Neptune in Aries. So this is, okay, you've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of big thinking with a Mercury trine Pluto. You've been meeting your needs, discovering who you authentically are. Have you maybe gotten a little romantic and idealistic? It's a good day for romance. but is it going to serve you? We always like to say, Sarai and I, when we're talking about people's partnerships, including our own, and is there potential in the room with you?
As a victim of a Venus Neptune natal aspect, I can go ahead and say the answer is almost always no.
Yeah. So this is a good day to have in you're invited to overly idealize relationships, and then that is the path toward looking at the material results you have and using that to create boundaries instead of pushing towards the ideal and punishing yourself with the ideal. And in this particular aspect with the Cancer Aries, like Sarai and I'm an Aries, Sarai's a Cancer. Sometimes the Aries ideal can be a little mean to the sensitive Cancer, and it's not very fair. And so, what you have to do is, again, take care of yourself. Use your boundaries to serve you, not to try to create the potential that is not coming forward in your relationships. Do you have thoughts about that?
Yes, I have thoughts about it. Yeah, I do. I think it is. I think a lot of it is about attuning to yourself and not being so focused and dissolving in to another person. Like for me, I think a lot of my challenges in relationships is like this urge to merge thing that happens that isn't necessarily healthy for me. And I think that a lot of when I'm going through like in transits like this, for instance, and or aspects that hit my chart that kind of stir this up, like a lot of my work is coming back to myself and naming what is true for me right now and really getting back in touch with what I actually want my life to be like and what that means for how my relationships feel, because I can very easily tolerate things in relationships that aren't actually good for me a lot. And so it is really coming back to what are my needs, my desires, and what does that mean for boundaries for me? Like keeping in mind that boundaries aren't rules for someone else. They're guidelines for myself about what feels good to me and what I need. And then I'm in full control over those boundaries all the time.
And even your space and what you're surrounded by.
Yeah.
I think while you were talking, I think one of the ways that this shows up for me, I don't have that particular natal a hard aspect, but I do have Neptune aspect to my Venus. And I think one of the ways that it shows up for me is, oh, if I am just more open, this other person will change. If I am just more authentic about who I am, and that's a very Aries thing, then the other person will get it and we won't have misunderstandings. And sometimes that is good advice and something to try out. And sometimes it is just not the actual problem, and the other person's showing you who they are and what they're available for.
Yeah.
And you have to believe them, which is hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And then it's hard to keep believing them even after the moment of, okay, I have to believe this passes. It's a discipline
Right.
in some ways to honor yourself at that level.
I think so too. And I think that it's almost like you have to use your prefrontal cortex about it instead of your body.
Yeah, for me going into human design, I think a lot for me is I want to be able to give someone an answer, engage with a thing, a
Yeah.
decision, like what's the situation, whatever it is. And I want to be able to be responsive. But for me, my human design authority is the emotional solar plexus, which
Yeah.
is I have to get to a place of neutrality about something, like emotionally, before I can actually come down to earth and identify what I feel about a thing. And so that honestly I've realized takes about 30 hours. Like it's
Yeah.
literally a 30-hour process. So it's not a full 36 hours or whatever. It's like I need a day and some time in order for this to land, and then I know what I need to do about it. And if I try to push it before that, then I end up doing stuff because I think that's the thing that another person wants me to do. So a lot of it is also, what is my time frame on things? Like, how do I give myself this much space? Because I do want to be responsive. Like, I want to move quick. My Venus is in Gemini too. Like, I want to just, let's go.
Yeah.
But it's also, it is important for me to check back in with all the rest of myself.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's different because I have sacral authority. I think that they are really different experiences. Mine's, I feel like my Virgo moon gets involved in this. I can fix this. Oh, I could do it different. And I could just move over here and I could change this. And I could, and it also is a pressure to be quick, but it's like has a different feel to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be like, okay, I'm activating my grown up adult brain and I'm looking at the external reality as though I was a scientist, which also is like a positive side, I think, of the Virgo moon in this particular instance. So this shows up different. I guess I say that to say this shows up differently for different people, but the Venus Neptune square is going to be present in the sky for everyone. So there's going to be this tension between what we idealize and what our relationships are. And even I think Neptune and Aries can have a sense of imagining that we are the center of the universe too. That's just a quality that we can be like, oh, I'm thinking about me and they're thinking about me. Are we all thinking about me?
Yeah.
And it might not be the case. And then it's sad when people aren't thinking about you.
Yeah.
So that's May 21st. May 22nd, the sun goes conjunct Uranus. And that can be an explosive experience. It's different than Mercury conjunct Uranus. Like we talked about, that can be a electricity fry out. The sun conjunct Uranus can be have more ramifications just worldwide in a practical way. Sometimes they're, depending on where they are, it's in Gemini now. We've seen this in Taurus and we've seen some earthquakes around that kind of aspect, but it's not the same as Mars conjunct Uranus, which is much more explosive. That's going to happen later this year. But the sun conjunct Uranus can be a day of sort of change, instability around how we show up in general, around our experience of life in general. It's a day to allow urges to happen, but not necessarily make a decision based on them. You don't have to blow up your life just because you feel the urge to change. And at the same time, this is a permission to change. If there have been changes that you've needed in your life that you've put off, if there have been ways you need to express yourself that you've put off, this is the day that gives you permission to do that. Just, it also can invite overdoing it a little bit. So that might be my judgment that I'm putting on it. But I think
my judgment on it is May 22nd, sun conjunct Uranus, and you get the urge to blow up your life. You should call me. I've done this a lot of times. And I'm a good companion for changing things in your life if you're ready to do that. And you just don't have to figure it all out by yourself if you don't want to.
yes, 100% agree. Call Sarai on the Sun Uranus day. I feel like I was thinking about, you had said a couple episodes ago about how Uranus transits can be really freeing and nice. And that was my experience when I had Uranus transits over my personal planets, including my sun. I feel like that was a space where I was like, YOLO.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a freak flag kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You're going to be a freak. Just go ahead. Just do it.
Yes. Yes. It's if you want to plan your Pride Parade, it's a good day for a Pride Parade. A Venus Uranus is like a little more on point to a Pride Parade, but why not? And then, so that's May 22nd, May 24th. The sun in Gemini sextiles Neptune in Aries. So that's another easy positive aspect between Neptune idealizing and how you express yourself. So sun Uranus is make the change, and then sun Neptune is could you imagine even more? What if you imagined even more of this? And also any kind of Neptune transit is a good day to establish what are the boundaries around this. Like Neptune pushes boundaries, and so then it asks us to look at the relationship between imagination and reality, I think, between stretching our boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries. And it brings up for me, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I think that we did that episode about Lindy West and about polyamory. And one of the things about boundaries that I see come up is my boundary is for you to comply with everything I say.
Yeah.
When we make the changes and express who we truly are, sometimes we can then say, and now everybody needs to like it and comply with who I am now and my expectations of how things land. And so that can be a process of respecting other people's boundaries, respecting consent, and also understanding our boundaries around people's input about who we now are.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't have to listen to other people describe us if we don't want to.
It's not my favorite.
No.
May 25th, Mars in Taurus squares Pluto in Aquarius. This is one of those more explosive days. This is a day that, so Mars is the god of war in a tense aspect with Pluto, the god of the underworld. This is a day where this kind of aspect, we often see a military conflict. We often see things that we don't like to see, especially if you live in a country like the United States that doesn't have regulation around dangerous weapons. It can also personally be a day where you feel pressure to engage in a conflict that you might have been putting off. I think if that's your opportunity to do it, if you are typically conflict averse, I think it's okay to do it as the universe pressures you to do it. I also think conflicts on a day like this can become more intense than if you choose a lighter day to do it, but you might want to develop awareness around the pressure to act, the pressure to show up, and the transformative process, the power that Pluto brings. How do you show up in the context of power? You take action and it's met with oppressive power. So that's May 25th. May 26th, the sun in Gemini is trine Pluto in Aquarius. And so that's a supportive aspect around power. So the end of the month asks us to look at how we show up related to power, how we engage with power that is oppressive to us, how we use our own power. So sun in Gemini, trine Pluto in Aquarius is a good day to take action, take protest action, take action to voice what you think how you think we should relate to each other in terms of power dynamics. Write your protest signs on that day. I think it's a good day to think about yourself and to use your power in a positive way for change. May 28th, Venus in Cancer squares Saturn in Aries. This is another practical one. Mars in Taurus squared Pluto in Aquarius is practical action that's in tension with the social justice, power around social justice, power around social hierarchy. That's May 25th. And then May 28th, Venus in Cancer squares Saturn in Aries. So that's like a tense aspect between how we relate to each other, our sensitivity around relationship, and structure, hierarchy, institutions. So that is like not a fun aspect. It says if there are places where you have been overly reliant or overly sensitive, now's the time to get some discipline. Now's the time to see consequences, to look at your consequences around it. If you've been enmeshing, like we talked about, like annihilating yourself in relationship to care for other people, it's a time where you personally will see the results of that. Like you might, if you're overextending yourself for other people, you might get sick. You have to acknowledge the consequences of the ways that you nurture others and nurture yourself. And then May 31st, we come back to the full moon in Sagittarius and that Mercury in Gemini, sextile Chiron in Aries. And the moons come full circle around the zodiac. And we're invited to look at the one truth and how it's in tension with the multiple perspectives of truth. And then think about, communicate about the wounds that we've had around being authentic. I think there's a lot of invitation to be present with how we nurture ourselves, how we nurture others, and what that means about who we authentically are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ooh, full month. I feel like there's something happening almost every day of May. That's wild.
When I started writing out the transits, I was like, oh, there's one thing a day. And then as you go along, especially in the middle of the month, there's a lot of activity.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to not say train wreck, but there are a lot of days where there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I think it's not a train wreck because I think enough of the aspects are really supportive aspects. And once we get to July, you have a Mars-Uranus conjunction. That's the aspect that, end of June, early July, just do a little prep for people. It gets a little more tense. But I think, like we talked about at the beginning, if you are feeling overwhelmed, even by just this list of aspects, if you're feeling like some of it doesn't make sense, it doesn't have to. You don't have to know all of this. If you have, I think if people focus on what does nourish them, focus on who they truly are, come back to your body, but also use your mind and look at your practical results. I think that there's a lot to use this month that brings out your genius and also your ability to nourish yourself and your community.
That's a lovely thing. That's good.
Yeah. Do you have other thoughts about all of this?
I don't really, but I would be curious if someone wants to know, I don't know, how some of these transits might hit their own natal chart. What could they do in order to learn about that, Meredith?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you so much, Sarai. So if you want to know how the transits are impacting you, the best way to do it is to schedule a natal chart consultation. And you can do that at fourthcupastrology.com. Sarai, if somebody wants to explore their changing nature and their nourishment of themselves and the pleasure that is available in their life through these transits, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Meredith, I'm so glad that you asked. One of the best ways that people can get in touch with me is go to my website, saraijohnson.com. It's just my name. And you can find a couple different things. One, a mini podcast series called Your Own Divinity that you can download. And you also can take a quiz to see how your energy centers are doing, whether they're leaking or blocked or
you have that up now?
Balanced. I will by the time this episode airs.
No, yes is the answer.
It is up. It is totally up right now. Right now.
Yay, that's awesome. Yeah, no, it's a great quiz. I took it. I got perspective on myself and I thought it was really helpful. And it creates a cool visual at the end. I like a little visual too.
I love a visual. It's super helpful. Yeah. And from there, if you're interested in booking a quick reading, I do that. But then, of course, working with me more directly, I do lots of different things. But there's a 90-minute healing session that I do with folks to get started. And then if you're interested in ongoing coaching, we talk about that after that.
Yeah, and Sarai did Reiki for me yesterday, and it was really fun. And one of the cool things was that she saw, accurately identified this mechanism that I had done in a meditation related to my Ajna chakra. And it's just cool with things like that. That's not the only time that's come up between us, but it's just always cool to me. Sarai is an energetic reading genius, and you all should. And we have scientific data related to that. And so it's not just my opinion, it's 100% correct.
Fantastic. I love this conviction with which we can say it.
Yeah. Yes. It's just science.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.